news story that's kind of been and gone in a sense. But I think the issues that were raised by it are still pertinent, and it certainly won't be the last time we hear of something like this. So I just want to comment on it a little, and that is the controversy created by the Labour MP David Lammy, who's the MP for Tottenham in London. Labour MP. He's a long-serving MP, quite a well-known figure in Parliament, and he's often been outspoken on racial issues. Now, what this particular controversy is about is that during the Red Nose Day appeal for comic relief, he apparently lambasted white saviours, and this was in reference to white documentary maker Stacey Dooley. I don't know much about her or her background, but anyway, um, she made a documentary, I assume, about poverty in Africa, and there's a stock photo showing her with a little black kid. Don't know which specific country. I think it was Malawi or somewhere like that, but I'm not too sure. She's white, as if didn't need to explain that. So anyway, I came across a DEC appeal on the TV just before the news update. Disasters Emergency Committee, which is an organisation, I believe it's a British organisation that brings about awareness of instant humanitarian needs. This isn't so much for long-term things like malaria treatment and tuberculosis treatment, but specific disasters as they happen. So in this case, it's Cyclone Idai, which has caused devastation in southern Africa, up to 1,000 dead, and maybe even in the thousands. So it's a very grave situation. Certainly, hundreds of people have died in Mozambique and Zimbabwe. So it's the worst natural disaster of 2019 so far. Anyway, it was a black guy they had doing that appeal, but I think Lamy is dead wrong, and this is why. Incidentally, apparently he laughed off suggestions that 8 million, that Comic Relief is down £8 million from last year. Comic Relief's probably the single biggest fundraising organisation in the country as a single format, and it's apparently last year it made 71 million. It's now 63 million. Now, I don't think that David Lammy's comments alone would have been responsible for that drop. I think there's a general cynicism about foreign aid. I think that's also part of the issue. But I want to just address specifically David Lammy's claims about the last thing Africa needs is another white saviour. Well, to me, this is a thing of, well, white people just can't win, can they? If the white people, and I hate this sort of them and us thing, but if white people don't give money to Africa, then it's all about bringing up the colonialist past. And the wicked British Empire exploited Africa for generations, and they owe us now. They need to pay back. But then, what have we been doing since the decolonization period of the 50s and 60s? This country has given billions and billions and billions in aid, both government level and the generosity of the British public. So you can't on one hand say the West owes Africa and then begrudge when white celebrities are actually trying to do something decent. I mean, I understand the argument about self-reliance, and I think that is very important. There's definitely weight to that argument, i.e., Africans aren't children. With independence comes responsibility. This is what I've said on issues related to empire. So, for a country to have independence, it also needs to show self-responsibility. But these countries are desperately, desperately poor, and they need foreign aid. I mean, they just can't function on their own without some degree of foreign aid. But it is totally legitimate. People ask where that goes. And anyway, I might be branching off into too many different areas here, but I think Lamy owes her an apology. I think he should apologize to Stacey Dooley because she is out there, and like I said, I don't know much about this woman, but she strikes me as a decent person. I mean, the thing is, it's easy to bash celebrities and say, "Oh, they're just virtue signaling. They're just doing it for the cameras. There's an enormous amount of cynicism around that." And this was true in both the Live Aid concert in 1985 and more recently the Live Aid concert, which I was at. You know, Bob Geldof and the other organisers got enormous backlash. Although I should say Live Aid was different from Live Aid. Live Aid was immediately raising money for the Ethiopian famine, devastating famine which killed up to 1 million people. Live Aid was not about money, it was actually about the Millennium Development Goals. So that was more specific and arguably more pragmatic. One of the main criticisms of Live Aid and um, the Live Aid appeal was that it went straight into the hands of the Ethiopian Derg militias. Um, you know, this was a country that was going through a brutal civil war and later a war with Eritrea. So I think there is legitimate concerns about where foreign aid goes. And I personally have a big problem with giving millions to a country like India. What does India do? It goes and then spends a lot of money on space programs and on giant statues of nationalist leaders. So, a country like India, we need to stop basically apologizing to them and start asking where is that money going? And you know, Indian nationalists love to play the old, oh, the wicked British can't tell us what to do because they colonized us for years. Yeah, India's been independent now for 74 years. So we can't always kind of accept that being thrown in our face like it's, you know, India's been independent for 74 years now, or 72 years. And, you know, I just think using colonialism as an excuse for all shortcomings is, I mean, some of the richest MPs in the world, in proportion to the population, are in sub-Saharan Africa. The average Kenyan MP, for example, makes a hell of a lot more than their British counterpart in proportion to the Kenyan population. Zambia, in real terms, the wealth poverty division in that country has got far worse in the period since it became independent. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to advocate for a return of the British Empire. I'm just pointing out the fact that blaming everything on imperialism is a cop out by Pan Africanists to basically mitigate responsibility from the fact that they have a long history of electing tyrants. It's just a fact. And it's an inconvenient truth. But anyway, not to derail, the whole white savior thing, it just gets nauseating. Um, you know, like I say, there is a big thing to be said for that sort of self responsibility. And yeah, Africans can do this themselves. But Africa is a continent, you know, 54 countries. And there is different situations in each country. Um, this is not directly connected, but I came across an article, I believe it was in the Times recently, where a Nigerian writer, she said that she's often asked, are you an African writer? Now, the interesting thing is, it isn't Europeans that ask this questions, other Africans. So the Pan Africanist ideology is actually imposed on all Africans by Pan Africanist ideologues. And that's a problem because African countries are hugely diverse. I mean, there's huge differences between Nigeria and Uganda or Egypt and Zimbabwe. You know, Africa is a big continent, second biggest continent. So getting back to the white savior thing, you can't have it both ways. You can't, on one hand, demand that European countries, and it isn't just Britain, European countries, you know, have to keep paying you back. But then when we actually do try to help, and when white celebrities actually try to be decent human beings and raise awareness of these things, then they're then bastard as you know, cynical, or they're doing it for attention, or you know, I think it's unfair. I think it's very unfair, and even more so than celebrities, I think it's very unfair on aid workers. I remember there was a Kenyan satire that was mocking aid workers in that country. Well, the thing about aid workers is they're very. I've known a few, and it would never occur to them to kind of take the attitude, oh well, if you're going to laugh at us, we'll leave, because they have a fundamental decency of seeing human suffering and they want to do something about it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there isn't corruption out there. I'm not saying that there aren't examples. I mean, goodness knows at the UN, that really blew a hole in any sense of morality when lots of UN peacekeepers were found to be exploiting people, raping people. But the way I see those sort of incidents, like the UN and Oxfam also had a scandal recently, it's not so much that those organizations are fundamentally bad, it's that bad people infiltrated them. That's how I see it. And that's a problem with the vetting process. So I totally understand the anger and the disillusion when people who are meant to protect or people who are meant to be providing humanitarian relief abuse that position. Like there were reports of aid workers in Haiti, giving food in exchange for sex. That's disgusting, and I hope they face justice. But to dismiss entire organizations that have done good work for decades, like for example in the case of Oxfam, that galvanizes right wingers who want a total halt to foreign aid, and I don't agree with that approach. And it also galvanizes race baiters. You know, foreign aid gets a very bad rap, and that's understandable. But my own view, I'll try and conclude with this. My own view is wealthy developed countries do have a moral obligation to help, but we also have a right to put caveat there that we have a right to know where exactly that money is going. And we have a right to know, for example, that if we're giving millions to a powerful country like India, which does have crippling poverty, but it's a powerful country at the same time, you know, it's a bit rich for Indians to play the victim when they have a rift, whatever it may be, with the UK and say, oh, you British can't lecture us and constantly bring up the Raj. When post independence India, and I might be, detracting here, but the not only the corruption and the use of money for the most ridiculous things when it could be, educating children, when it could be providing safe drinking water. Those are the sort of things that when people give money to charity, they want to know that money is going to those sort of causes. Not to, and I'm not saying, by the way, that the money we send to India is directly going to, for example, building giant statues. That may be from another government department, but it does show that if India is prioritizing those things, and under Modi, it has been, Hindu nationalism is more important in the Modi era, apparently, than anything else, then we have a right to say, well, wait a second, if that's the case, we're going to put a halt to this. In the end of the day, it is British citizens who are funding this in large part. So it's right that those questions are asked. As for the white savior narrative, I think David Lammy needs to apologise to Stacey Dooley. He's basically smearing her, and she's doing apparently a lot more than he is. I don't know what sort of work he does to alleviate poverty in Africa, but instead of attacking the white saviors and just stoking up racial divisions, why not do something productive? Um, I mean, he lives in Tottenham, North London. He should be prioritising issues around knife crime, not attacking white saviors, so-called white saviors. I mean, there's been a long-standing thing about this. I remember when the film Amazing Grace was made about the life of William Wilberforce. It was all, oh, it's a white savior movie. But William Wilberforce was central in the abolitionist movement. So why not make a film about a great man? That's what I take issue with. If white people don't do anything, then they're greedy imperialists. And when they do actually try to do something decent, then, oh, it's the white saviors. They just want the credit, they want the attention. There's a lot to be said for self reliance, and, Africans aren't children. Of course, they could do it themselves, and that should be encouraged. But I have a big problem with smearing people who are just trying to help. They're just trying to be decent human beings. They see suffering in the world and they're trying to alleviate it. So smearing those people in that way is just, these are people, I'm not talking about the celebrities here, by the way, but I'm talking about aid workers, people who dedicate their lives to helping other people. And the vast majority of them are not famous. They're not doing it for attention. They're not doing it for fame. They're doing it because they feel it's just the right thing to do. If you want to be cynical about that and say, oh, it's this, that, and the other, my question is, well, what are you doing? What are you doing to help people? So I get a little bit annoyed when charity is so vociferously attacked. Yes, there's a lot of flaws. Yes, people have a right to know where their money is going. Absolutely. But when someone like David Lammy is, trying to stoke up racial animosity, and like I said, I don't think that 8 million drop it would be solely down to him. I think that would be silly, but it might be partly down to it. I don't know. Anyway, I think he should apologize, and I think he should show some humility and just accept that on this occasion he was wrong to show that narrative in this situation. I mean, does he want only black celebrities, featuring those sort of stories? Well, then the argument would be, oh, the white people don't care. So basically, white people can't win because if they do try to help, and I'm talking in very generalized terms here, but if a white celebrity is, trying to raise awareness of something, oh, it's a white savior role. And if they don't, then they're greedy imperialists. So, I think I think we need to basically counter that sort of unfair criticism and challenge it, challenge what the real agenda is, and say, well, do you want to help people in this situation, or are you only interested in attacking white saviors? It's not just David Lammy, there's others. I mean, the New African magazine used to be push a very Pan-Africanist worldview, and it was the evil Europeans can never do anything right, even though European countries have been giving millions in aid for decades. I would close with this. The whole thing about self-determination and independence is people taking care of their own affairs, right? But one thing I've noticed with the Pan-Africanist ideology is whenever it's convenient to play the victim and blame everything on Europe, that's fine. But when it's actually, for example, African governments doing persecuting, for example, of gay minorities in a country like Uganda, then it's, oh, this is our internal affairs, mind your own business. You can't have it both ways. You can't play the victim and then persecute others. And I'm talking in very generalizing terms. Africa, like I say, is big continent, diverse, 54 countries, over 1 billion people. So there's many Africans would agree with me, but the Pan-Africanists think that they're the only ones who count. So I think that needs to be analysed as well.